Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the penultimate Design at Large talk for this fall. And today, I am just thrilled that Mary Beebe, who runs the Stuart Collection, is joining us today. I'm guessing that, given the large turnout for it being close to finals week, many of you know exactly what the Stuart Collection is. And for me, I think it is maybe the most remarkable collection of contemporary public art on any university campus I've been to. It's just an extraordinary collection. And so when I emailed Mary seeing if she might be able to come give a talk, I figured there was no way possible, but we juggled a few things, and Mary was thrilled to join us, which is a real honor to speak to, for us, to have somebody from a different community come and speak. If you haven't seen the Stuart Collection, there's a wonderful map on the UCSD website that will walk you through it. And I think what's so interesting about it as a collection is that it's both always, it's really omnipresent on campus. You can't walk anywhere, probably literally, without seeing at least some of the public art. And yet at the same time, there are all of these gems that are completely tucked away. Many of which from famous artists with really interesting stories, and even the stuff that is visible, you may not know how it came to be. And if you're a gallery curator who hangs art on walls, that has one set of challenges. When you hang houses on buildings, the community onboarding and logistics of all of that is just a whole nother level. And so this really is Design at Large. So please welcome me and join Mary.
Thank you, Scott. That was really nice. I'm not really a different community. This is really, we're part of the university community. I guess I should start. I can go on and on and on and tell too many stories, so if you get really bored and want to leave, feel free. James Stewart Silva, in the mid-70s, moved to La Jolla with his wife from New York. And he had begun collecting art. Excuse me, this is going to be too hot. They had collected some art, and he actually, as a 50th birthday present to himself, he took a year off from his business, which was being very successful, and went to Columbia and took art history. He got so enthralled with the history of art and the world of art that he decided there had to be Michelangelos today. So he went about, trying to explore that. And they also walked around the campus. They didn't want to buy a bigger house. They didn't want to really be collectors. He thought that maybe he could help change the campus and bring some art. And so he worked out a deal with the university whereby he started it by giving $1.5 million, not quite, but almost. And they put out a job application. I was up in Portland, Oregon. I wasn't looking for a job. I was running a contemporary art space up there. But I got a call from one of the faculty, the art faculty, Newton Harrison, and he said, will you come down and talk to us about a sculpture project? Well, it ended up, when I met Jim De Silva and Pat Ledden, I don't know if any of you remember Pat, but he was here then, I thought, wow, these guys are really real. This is, this is something that could be a real thing. So I changed my life. I upped my stakes and moved down here, and not really knowing what was going to happen or how to proceed. So it took me. That was 1981. The campus wasn't as big as it is now, but it took me a while to even find my way around, much less figure out how to do anything. So Nikki DeSanfal had already been selected by the advisory board. One of the best things Jim did was to set up this advisory board to the collection, which is one member from the art department, which has been Newton, and then it's been Kim McConnell, and then these other very important people like John Walsh, who's is the director emeritus now of the Getty Museum. Hugh Davies, who's directed the Museum of Contemporary Art here in San Diego. It was Anne Darnancourt, who was head of the Philadelphia Museum until she died tragically. It is Rob Stiller, who's the dean at Yale. Patricia Fuller, who ran a program at MIT. I know I'm leaving somebody out. Anyway, what it does, they decide artistic merit. So when I bring artists to campus and work on proposals, those proposals go to this advisory board, and they say, and that artist can do better, or, you know, or great idea, you know, let's see what we can, let's go for it. And it protects the chancellor in a way. The chancellor, when people say, how can you call that blue fence art? He can say, he or she can say, hey, you know, I'm a chemist, what do I, or a physicist or whatever, what do I know about art? But I've got this advisory board that tells me that this is really good art. So it's, you know, and it keeps it out of campus politics in a way. It gives me a lot more freedom to sort of do, we don't put things up for a vote. Can you imagine if we had the campus vote, or even the faculty vote on these projects? It's not. It's just this advisory board who have spent, the people who've spent their lives thinking about these things. So anyway, that was really smart and has been very helpful. I work for the chancellor. You know, I don't work for the art department. I work for the chancellor, and it has been really helpful. Well, before I even got here, the advisory board had selected Nikki de Saint Phal as the first work. So my first job was to figure out how to get this bird here to San Diego and how to build the arch. Nikki had sent us a little maquette about this high and said, out of styrofoam, and said, just build this 6 times as big out of concrete. Well, you know, the Department of Buildings and whatever, Facilities and Design thought this whole idea was really crazy, and that students would rip everything down, and that it was going to be an exercise in sheer folly, embarrassment, and terror. I don't know. Anyway, so they didn't want to be helpful. So I said to Jim, I worked with a young man in Portland who I thought was really good, not only a good artist, but a really great problem solver. And his name is Matthew Gregoire. And he came down and figured out how to do this. And he's still here. He's worked on every single project. And he really figures out the technical aspects. He works with the contractors and the, you know, the structural engineers and all that kind of stuff, while I raise money or do a lot of other stuff too. But anyway, Matthew really did figure out how to make that arch bigger. And we went to Nikki's studio in France, and we had a wonderful time. So he built that, and then the bird came in February of 1983. And it came in an open slatted crate down the freeway on a big truck. You could see the bird in there. Pat Lennon and I drove up and followed it down for a ways. It was quite a scene. And then we, quote, flew it. You know, the faculty club wasn't there yet. We flew it to its base, and we served cookies in the shape of the sun god, and we had lemonade and stuff. And it was met with a mixture of delight, distress, dismay. No, nothing like this had ever happened before. One professor said to me, "It looks like the 3rd grade to me." I said, "Did you have a bad time in the 3rd grade?" Anyway, but the very next year, the students started the Sun God Festival. I did not start the Sun God Festival, the students did. And that was really cool. And of course, the Sun God has gotten all kinds of decorations and things. This is a really old one, as you can imagine. Sony Walkbird. Students now don't have a clue what a Sony Walkman was, but it's gone cap and gown for graduation. It became very distinctly male one spring day. The guy from the newspaper called me and said, "Mary, have you seen the sun god today?" And I said, "Yeah, I have." He said, "Well, are you waiting for help from the School of Medicine to take that down?" I said, "No, some students went to a lot of trouble to get it up, and I think I'll just leave it there for a while." I said, "Won't you put a picture in your newspaper?" And he said, "We're a family newspaper." Anyway, so that's, I mean, you all are familiar with the sun god, and you know, seen it in its various machinations. But, and I thought that the next thing we should have would be really different. I didn't want people to think that we were going to just do oversized statuary all around the campus. And what I had been hired to do, in a way, was to work with artists. We didn't want to do another Murphy Garden like UCLA, which is a great, great place and a wonderful thing. But I wanted to work with the artists. That's was always been my passion, and I didn't want to go around buying things. So I asked Bob Irwin to think about what he might do. And he actually, who's a great California light and space artist. I don't know if you all know, but he's really, he's now 80. I hate to say it, I think he's 87. But he's still going strong, and he is doing things all over the world. Anyway, he came here, and he spent some time on campus just walking around. And what he loved was the way the light played in these eucalyptus groves, the way it moved through the groves, and the way the trees changed and the light changed, and how it was different in the fog and in the bright sun. And so he did this scrim, which he'd been working with scrims for a while. He put it up, he calls it 2 running violet V-forms. I like to say that every decision he made in this work is based on qualities that existed in the grove. So you can sort of see here, well, in the next one you can see better, actually, that it, oh no, you can, sorry. I was going to say that it plays off the rows of trees. You know, all these trees have been planted in rows by the railroad for use to make into railroad ties, which didn't work out. But we have the legacy of these groves, and they're really, the way that they have a kind of calming, quiet effect, and the smells are kind of great. So he wove these 2 running violet V-forms through the grove. The stainless steel poles don't compete with the trees. They kind of blend in and come and go. It changes pretty dramatically, you know, from something like this to something like this, and it changes as you walk through it. It changes as the sun goes over. It changes with the seasons. Here you can see this one element, one stripe or strip going right down the center of the rows of trees. So he harks to all the qualities that exist in that grove. And I say it's also like a ribbon of sky brought down into the grove, maybe. You see the shadows of the trees on it sometimes. It also causes you to look up at the sky. And the little plants that are around sometimes, I think they're going to bloom pretty soon, are purple plants, and they're, it's just ice plant, which is one of the few things that grows under eucalyptus. But they change, you know, with the season too. So, you know, it's been thought, a lot of people thought it was athletic equipment or science equipment. There was a rumor that it was a giraffe catcher, and somebody said, "Do you have trouble with giraffes up there?" I said, "Not anymore." So it's not any of those things. It's not badminton for giants. It's not, it's just there. A student said to me, not so long ago, he said, when I first came to campus, I wasn't really thinking about art. He was at an art opening, you know, at the gallery when it existed. But he said, I came to campus and I saw that blue fence, and I thought it might be art. I thought it might be art. And I love that. You know, that makes my heart go pitter-patter, because it means that somebody's paying attention and there's something different going on. And why is that? And what is it? And what is happening? So I like the idea of these works causing or sparking people to think in sort of different ways than they normally would, and when they're all engrossed in deep in their books and their studies. This is a work by Richard Fleischner, commonly known as Stonehenge, as I'm sure you know. It's not really related to Stonehenge. It doesn't connect with the solar system or the seasons or anything else, but he's really thought carefully about this whole big space and placing elements at the perimeters, defining the space, and just making it into a territory where it was clear that somebody had thought about it. So you have these different stone elements, granite elements. There's actually 2 colors of stone that are just all for people to sit on and read or dance on or whatever. You know, they're very carefully put in, and they kind of frame different views that he thought about. Here you can see the 2 different colors. You've got the warm brown of the ground and then the gray blue of the sky. People have chosen this place for all kinds of things, from weddings to memorials to festivals. So I think that shows that people do recognize that it's kind of a special place, that it's, you know, it's not just any open lawn, it's got something else going on. Terry Allen's trees. Terry Allen is an artist from Lubbock, Texas. He's a musician as well. He has written operas, he's written stories, he's written operas that played at Lincoln Center. I mean, he's got a band, the Panhandle Mystery Band. He writes songs. He's an incredible draftsman. He can draw beautifully. He has incorporated all kinds of things into his performances and into his artwork. And for us, he had a few different ideas, but for us, the idea we liked best was this idea of 3 trees, 2 of which are wired for sound. He chose 3 trees that had been cut down by the university to make room for, well, where the engineering is now. But, and I should tell you, just digress for a moment, because the students did a great thing. They cut down this whole grove, and you know, because the trees are in line, like an orchard, they left stumps about 1 foot high. And students went out in the night and put white styrofoam crosses on each of those stumps. So it looked like a graveyard. It gives me goosebumps still to think about that. It was so amazing when they did, to sort of protest this taking down of these trees. But anyway, Terry chose 3 of those trees that he really liked, the shape of. And we wired 2 for sound, the music and poems story, the music and songs tree, and then the poems and stories tree. And they're placed back in the grove where a tree had fallen. So we had them creosoted like telephone poles so they wouldn't rot. And then we planted them where a tree had fallen. So they're sort of been given this new life. And the 2 wired trees, you know, sing or talk. There are periods of silence. Terry didn't want it to be like Muzak in an elevator that you heard all the time. So there are periods of silence, so you might not hear them, you might notice them, or you might not, or you might hear them and not have noticed them, which is very strange. You know, of course, the old idea if only trees could talk is something we know, but we don't expect to actually happen. So there they sit in the grove. They've been there since 1986, working 24/7. I love it when students come to me with stories of bringing their visiting friends and taking them down into the grove. This silent tree was originally up closer to the library, but in 92, well, it was finished in 92, but in the early 90s when they added on all the underground part of the library, we took this tree down and stored it over across 5. And then when they finished, and they had the building and the entrance and all that all finished, I was having lunch with now his name just slipped out of my head, but the then new librarian, who's not the librarian anymore. It'll probably come to me, and I said to him, by the way, one of the things we're going to do is put the tree back in, and then we're going to put it right at the beginning of the long walk going down. He said, oh, no, we nixed that. Well, nobody has the power to nix anything other than the chancellor. But it's not in my interest to tell him that he doesn't have the power to nix anything. So I took a deep breath and went into my spiel. And at the end he said, well, you've been very convincing. I've changed my mind. I think the tree should go in there. But you're going to have to convince the deans. Well, the deans had obviously met with him. I said, well, will you help me set up a meeting with the deans? And he said, yes, he would. So I met with him. This is probably late 91 or something. And they were skilled. There were 4 guys. There was the one woman dean, Marjorie, couldn't come. They were in a really cross mood or something. It's an ugly dead tree. They said it's just an ugly dead tree. We don't want it. I said, well, ugly like beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and not everybody's going to think it's ugly. Oh, yes, everybody's going to think it's ugly. I said, well, there are a lot of ways to think about this tree. It's silent, compared to the others, so it could be about the importance of silence in the library or in our lives, or it could be a tree of knowledge out there by the library. Oh, no, it's just an ugly dead tree. I said it could be a tree of dance. We've got poems and stories and music. This could be, it's the most graceful. It could be a tree of that dance. No, they weren't buying into anything. I finally said, listen, it could be a tree that commemorates all the trees that have been cut down to make books. Oh, that gave them a little pause. But they just kept saying, ugly dead tree. Ugly, we don't want it. It's ugly dead tree. And I finally said, listen, we're at a university. It's our job to expand ways of thinking, and definitions are a lot, and thinking of expanding definitions is a way of doing that. I said, for instance, if you invited people to your house for Thanksgiving turkey or roast chicken, you'd get a whole different response than if you invited them for dead bird. One said, I give up. They kept saying, the fire, I said, we'd run it by the fire marshal, they had all these other things, but we'd already taken care of. He said, Stan said, I give up. I can think of no reasonable objection, which of course there wasn't, but it was just a matter of their taste. And of course, so it went up, and I never heard a peep from them, because Chancellor loved it, all kinds of people liked it. It was just fine. I saw Cooper's hawk sitting in it not long ago. That was pretty cool. We had to stabilize some of the branches a couple of years ago. And the guys at the Scripps Machine Shop, Scripps Oceanography Institution, helped us fill it with acrylic. It was the small branches up there that were in trouble, because they've got nails in them. And anyway, but it's all there now. I don't think everybody notices it. Once I was walking around, some students said, what is this? This is a tree. I said, yeah, it's a tree. They said, it's never been here before. I said, how long have you been here? Anyway, they were totally surprised. But one of the things I like to say is art is about paying attention and thinking about your environment and what's around. And if you notice things, then your life can really be enhanced. So this is Jun Paik, known as the godfather of television art, or the grandfather, or the whatever. He had this idea of putting these Buddhas and TVs outside, like a graveyard or a TV landscape. And of course the media center, where students are studying television and all that, was the logical place. So even though the chancellor wasn't too keen on having disintegrating televisions around, the media department were very happy to have the first major permanent installation of Nam June. So that one, so here you have what he calls the samurai Buddha staring into this framework of an old TV, watching the grass grow. Sort of, how do we think about television? Do we think about it like Buddhas in meditative, long-term time? What are archaeologists going to think of TVs in the way in the future? What does it mean? What has it meant? Or do we think in 30-second sound bites, like TV has taught us to do in so many cases? So then inside, we have these live TVs that are wired so that they're interactive. And we have just, Namjoon said, when we put this in, we said to him, what should we do when these become obsolete? And he said, just get some students to figure it out. The students will know what to do. So the synthesizer that, I don't know what you say, coordinated, you engineers know this stuff better than I would, but sort of that these images went through, had totally worn out, couldn't be fixed anymore. And we were at our wits' end. We were told that there was just nothing to do. But we got 2 engineering classes. Matthew did mostly, working with them. And so now they've been made interactive so that you can do things from your own computer. You can do it when you're there. There's things that you can push, but it's all been sort of reinvented. The most important thing to Namjoon was that it was interactive, because he said, I want the students to have as much influence on this work as TV is going to have on them. So anyway, it's now working again, and anybody can mess with it. And there are all the outdoor televisions that you can play with. And you can't really play with them, what am I saying? But you can look at them and think about them. This is Ian Hamilton Finley. The library has he was a poet and an artist. He didn't really sculpt things himself. So that's, he was interested in putting language into the landscape. And so I said, the library here has a great poetry collection, and they have quite a bit of Ian's work. And what he thought about was the word unda. So you have the wave sign rolling through the word, here, switching, you have to switch those letters, and then it will come out correctly at the end. So you have the actual wave of the ocean, which you can't really see, but you know is there, and you can see the ocean sometimes. And the word, the sign, and the actuality overlooking this playing field where you can watch man at play, or you can watch the sunset, the spectacle of nature, and of course the learned person always knows Latin. And of course Spanish too. Onda is Spanish, so you've got all those things. It sort of stair steps out, horizontally beyond the university campus to the ocean. People say, well, can we just sit on them and drink beer? And I said, sure. And if you want to think about the roots of language, you could try undulating. But that space is meant to stay forever for a playing field. You can see them here. Then we have Bruce Nauman, who had this great idea of putting the vices and virtues on Mandell Wyse theater, which became very controversial. I have a file this thick of letters to the chancellor, people saying, we do not want neon in our neighborhood, or people saying, yes, we would love to have the neon in our, well, it was the second season, it was 83. It was the second season of the Playhouse, and they were very nervous about controversy. They didn't really want to mess with it. So they just didn't think they wanted it. And now they wish they had it, because people have trouble finding the theater. And we had thought, when Bruce and I were just walking around the campus, and we were happened to be trying to remember the vices and the actual vices and virtues. And of course, hope, faith, hope, charity are easy. And then you have to go from there, and you're not quite sure. So anyway, that's what we had been thinking about. And we came across the Mandell Wyse, this big box up there, and it looked, great, neon theater, marquees theater, vices and virtues, you know, the forces of human nature that theater is about. That's perfect. Well, it became, as I say, quite controversial. The city councilman from La Jolla called a press conference up there and said, if the university is allowed to put lust up here in neon, it will incite infidelity in the community. The paper called me again and said, what do you think? And I said, there are 14 words. How come he chose lust? Doesn't that say something about him? We do. Anyway, the chancellor, Dick Atkinson, asked me to hold off. And I said, just can't hold, it's too important an artist and too important a work. You know, I can't hold off forever. But then Lee Rudy, the dean of engineering, said, this building had just gone up. And he said, or it was in the process of going up. And he said, Mary, maybe you could put it on our building. Well, we got Bruce back out and we looked at it and it was perfect. Around the theater, the letters were going to only be 2.5 feet high. Here they're 7 feet high. And you get the window up there that they're over. And so you get the three-dimensionality back. You know, you can see through the other side and that it goes all the way around still. And I love this building. I think that Leonard Weitzer, who designed it, is a really interesting architect. And he luckily really likes this work. So we don't usually ask the architect, but in this case, Leonard was very enthusiastic. But the vices and virtues flash. You know, they come on anytime after dark. It's usually after 3. In the winter, it's better than, of course, in the summer. I mean, it's earlier. The virtues are in upright letters, and they flash sequentially clockwise with the world. And the vices are in italics, and they flash counterclockwise against the world. You get all possible combinations of words, and then it starts up again. So that's because the vices have slightly less time. They have 1/4 of a second less time than the virtues. So I told the chancellor that the moral tenor of the university was going to be on the rise as soon as this went up. But it really is, at night, to me, it still makes my heart go pitter-patter. It's just, one of the letters said, well, against it said, anybody who comes to the university who doesn't know the vices and virtues shouldn't be there. You know, I had thought, well, you know, people will remember which are vices and virtues now. We had a hard time discussing it, but anyway, there they are, still looking beautiful. Since 1988, they've been going, and they come on every night. And this is Bill Wegman, known for his Weimaraner dogs, Sesame Street, and you probably all seen, or maybe grew up with, his videos on Sesame Street with the Weimaraners dressed up and doing things that people would do. But he's a really interesting artist beside that. And I ran into him at a party in LA and said, what do you think? Do you ever think about sculpture? And he said, yeah, sometimes. He now says that was just a lie, but that he didn't really think about sculpture. But I said, come on out and let's look around. And so he did, and we wound up out here. We actually built that slope up a bit to make it extend out a little bit more. But, you know, and we were looking at this, you can see that a lot hasn't been built yet when this first went in. Like the Mormon temple's not there, Aviar is just sort of beginning. There's not much there. But so he said, we could do this like a national park, you know, where they have these information or, you know, pictures of identifying what you're seeing. So in this bronze plaque, everything out there was identified. I mean, when I say everything, I mean, you know, most of the things. But there are things like mystery dirt, a lost development, you know, a student testing site, you know, all kinds of leashing building or something like that. But then there's smells and aromas and other things coming in that were coming up from the houses. And so it's really kind of an adventure in looking at this map and sort of looking out and seeing if you can find anything. The seeing out, you can use this telescope, which is free. I was told that I would have to get permission from every resident. I said, okay, fine. Didn't do it. Sometimes you just have to make compromise. Anyway, then now here it is here with the Mormon temple. And so you can see what it was like there in 1987. And we've never had a complaint from anybody about somebody trying to look in their window through the telescope. But people get married out here, the theater people practice out here. It's just kind of a little bit of national park in there. There's a drinking fountain. We went around to the various parks, Torrey Pines and various parks, trying to check out what everything looked like, so we could bring some of that into this scene. And the stones are all San Diego stones. You can see that this is the drinking fountain here. It's just very simple. Then there's Jackie Farrar's Terrace, which I don't know if you know, is over at the School of Medicine. They asked me if I knew of anybody who did terraces. Jackie's done a lot of terraces. And to me, she put a sort of musical tone into these, and a rhythm into the sort of progression of that expanse. And here are the benches. And she just wanted, and I think they wanted, a quiet place where scientists could go in between whenever they had a quiet time. We knew that the building adjacent was going to be built, but so now that's all filled in with building. But Jackie played with all of that, and she chose the trees and worked with as part of the design team for the whole building with Charles Moore Rubel Udell firm, which did it. This is Michael Asher's drinking fountain. It's the only permanent outdoor work of Michael's in the world. He's a really important conceptual artist, and he spent maybe 2 years sort of poking around. He'd come down from LA, poking around the campus to try and figure out what he might do. And when he discovered this plaque on that stone, he thought, oh, wow, he's very interested in the historical roots of institutions. And he's done some funny things like switch the lions at the Chicago Art Institute so that they're looking out instead of in. Or maybe the other way around, I don't know, I can't remember. Or for the Whitney Museum, his project was to keep it open for 24 hours a day for a month or a week, I can't remember. He did, anyway, his things are usually very ephemeral and gone before you know it. Here he thought, okay, it was right on the median strip. This median strip was the center of the military campus. The headquarters was just off there on the left. I don't know if you were around for that nice old wooden building that they finally tore down because it was full of termites and everything else. And they built the big student center. But this strip, historically, was the center of everything that went on here before 1964, when it was turned over to the university. So that is a military flag. What do you say? It's not a proper, but regulated? No, there's another word. But it was put in that concrete. There's dates on the concrete platform for it that say something 1943. So that's from 1943. So what Michael did was build this sculpture of a drinking fountain. It's an exact replica of a working drinking fountain that you see in offices and schools everywhere. But here, he placed it in the middle of this, it's not up against the wall. It's in the middle of this area, but he says that when you lean down to have a drink of water, the flagpole acts as a sight line to the rock, which is the history of the campus. Now that's very subtle. And most people, of course, don't realize that that's the whole point. But the students have their own stories. They say it's smart water. You have to have a sip before exams. And somebody said, well, or you're bowing to the chancellor. So anyway, but it's interesting because I don't know if you know that it was destroyed in January by it's really sad, a crazed student, and who was, I don't know if he was on drugs or what the deal was, but he had on a black cape and a black hat and black gloves, and he went around and destroyed stuff in that whole territory. So it's not like he was after the Stuart Collection. It's just he destroyed cameras and lights and things on top of the chancellor's office and other stuff around. So, but he totally smashed the drinking fountain, which was just devastating because it was so angry, for one thing. It was just really hard to take. But we had all the plans. He's died. So we have all the original plans. We have all the original people. Matthew worked on the first one. The guys at Scripps Machine Shop did all the metallics, the metal stuff on it, and we were able to reproduce it with the blessing of the Michael Asher Foundation, who are actually going to give some money to the library to buy more Michael Asher books and catalogs and stuff. And so it's now back and working. And it was nice because the guys installing it, again, Scripps, said that lots of people stopped and said how happy they were to see it back. Now, I mean, people were writing their theses on Michael Asher, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, that's sort of like a fountain with a secret. This is Jenni Holzer's green table. A table is to come together, to eat, to learn, to whatever. And this table, of course, has writings all over it from Jenni. So she wanted to cover it like what did she say? She wanted to have it covered like a tattoo lady with all these writings that were all hers. She doesn't use her own anymore, but she uses other poets and things who she thinks are better. But these are really kind of cool sayings. I mean, I don't know if you've ever looked at them, but it's, what urge will save us now that sex won't? Fathers can be tyrannical. Abuse of power comes as no surprise. Expiring for love is beautiful but stupid. And there's all kinds of moods. She chose things from different series. She has a truism series, and she has another one is Protect Me from What I Want. That's one of my favorites. Anyway, from all of her different series. So people do rubbings, which is really sweet. It's her own, I think it's her only table in the world. She's done lots of benches, but this is on the tabletop and the bench top. It's the snake path, drawing for it. Here's the snake path head by Alexis Smith. Again, this was when the library was being expanded underground. And Alexis had this idea of doing a snake, the serpent of knowledge from the Garden of Eden, an actual path winding up to the library, which we thought would be great. And the library loved the idea. So it took a while to build this and to raise the money. But the tile guys that we hired all got, it was in the 80s, late 80s, and when the Depression was on, or the recession, or whatever we call it, they got T-shirts that said Team Snake. And so they were very proud that they were working on this snake. And it winds, as you know, up there. But the tail wraps around this path as if it were the branch of a tree. When you see images of the Garden of Eden, the snake usually has, it's wrapped around and coming down with the apple to offer to Eve. Then, of course, we have the little Garden of Eden up there. And we have the book, the Garden of Eden. I don't think I have a picture of the Garden of Eden. I'm trying to shorten this. But the book that has this quotation from Milton's Paradise Lost on it. Wilt thou not be loath to leave this paradise, yet shalt possess a paradise within thee happier far. So that sort of sets up the metaphor for the university as paradise, but you have to go forth in the world. And in the Garden of Eden is a bench, a marble bench or granite, carved with a quotation for Thomas Gray that says, "Yet why should they know their fate, since sorrow never comes too late and happiness too swiftly flies?" Thought would destroy their paradise. No more. Where ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise. So you have that. So you can sit in the garden and be innocent and ignorant, and then you have to go out and face the world. And one of the things I love is that when you go out and face the world, you come out of the library at night with your newfound knowledge and having lost your innocence, and you encounter the vices and virtues, the forces of human nature that did not exist in paradise. We have Elizabeth Murray's Red Shoe. Elizabeth Murray's, I thought asking a painter would be fun to have the hand of a painter somewhere in the collection. And Elizabeth, to me, is one of America's, or was one of America's great painters. And so she was very influenced by Disney and, well, a lot of other artists, but, and the idea of animation and moving things. So this shoe looks kind of like it's running through the forest. But of course, the question is, where's the other shoe? You know, it's very Mother Goose-like, but it's also kind of quizzical. Kids can play in it, use it like kind of a fort. I don't know if that happens, but there's a new bicycle path that's going to go through right near it, so it'll get much more exposure and light. And I think it's kind of fun to have. The crane guy said it looks like a duck. But, you know, the yellow shoelace is coming down out of it. Does that look like a duck? Maybe. Then we have this over at the School of Medicine, Kiki Smith, who is thinking about the body and what it, you know, we all have a body, but our bodies are very different, and but they influence us in very subtle ways that are hard to know. But here, she's got this woman, obviously, you know, female, but not sexual in any way, with her hands out in this very vulnerable pose, sort of Madonna-like, or Virgin Mary, or she thinks a lot, she's Catholic, so she's thought a lot about Christian iconography. And she's got the water's coming up through the tree column and then down back to the ground. The tree column was made from a dead eucalyptus tree that we had cast. What I love is that you can see in it, not in this picture, but you can see the beetles, the lines of the beetles that probably killed it. So you have a kind of memento mori, and they look like vessels or veins or arteries, and then as the roots go into the pond, they look kind of like veins and vessels too. She's very calm. You know, medicine and dignified. Medicine can help you, but not always. Skin is vulnerable. And in what she called me from the foundry before it came here, and she said, "Mary, I've done a surprise." I thought, oh God, you know, what has Kiki done? Because she is known for, she's done some really great works, but, you know, with water coming out of every female orifice, and feces coming out in the form of glass, but that's at the Whitney Museum. But so I thought, oh dear, it was hard enough to talk the School of Medicine into this. Now what do I do? But she'd put these little starfish up into the bodice, and they're in the shape of the constellation Virgo. She had seen the constellation Virgo, an image of it pouring water, a woman pouring water, and also it connects her to the sky. That's Kiki had started thinking about the celestial happenings and stuff, so she wanted to connect her to the sky. So that's what she did. And you can see here she looks kind of grim, but the birds drink out of her hands, which is really nice. Here are the roots coming in, looking like flesh or bones. The sound of the water coming down too is really quite wonderful. Okay, this is John Baldessari. John is another artist who grew up in National City. He has taught here taught at UCLA for years. He's become one of the most well-known figures in art around the world. And I said, he said, Mary, he kept saying, Mary, I'm not a sculptor. I said, I know, but you've taught here, you're an important artist, we need you, you've been an important teacher, and I know you can think of something. So he came and we wandered around, and he was thinking about doors. He really wanted to do some Ghiberti-like cast bronze doors with the sort of morals of the time on them depicted, and that we just couldn't make work. I mean, maybe at an Ivy League campus with big old brick buildings and sort of solid doors, but we don't have those in California. So here at the library, we thought, oh, good, we can use all these windows and just take them over. So he wanted to bring students into the picture. So we had a grad student take photographs of students. And then John chose the ones he liked, and they're standing on pedestals of books, holding up the building like caryatids. The books were chosen by the librarians. Again, it's not John's hand in here, in the thing. And then he read, Read, Write, Think, Dream. He had rubber stamps when he taught, and he would stamp students' papers with read, write, think, or dream. So he wanted those words to be in. And then, of course, the doors are red, yellow, blue. So when they open, you get orange and green, which are the primary colors, and the secondary colors. Here you can see, looking through, you see the pens and pencils, sort of the instruments of learning, in a way, in the prismatic order of color. They're not in the color John chose, they're in the prismatic order. And then you have these palm trees on the doors, sort of echoing the vertical. And then you have this other image of the ocean, which is, where we are, but also, again, the world beyond the university. So those are busy doors. And the library's just gotten a whole lot of money to redo that whole ground floor, but Brian assures me that the Baldessari is going to not be touched. So it'll be there for a while. And we have Bear. I hope I'm not taking too much time. Anyway, this Bear, Tim Hawkinson had the idea. He was an artist who uses things he finds around, every thrift shop things, his body, whatever he can find, and not spend too much money on it. So he lives in Altadena, so he knows the rock formations around here, between here and the desert. There's all those granite rock formations, and he'd see animal shapes in those formations, and so he thought, well, let's make an animal out of rocks. And he decided that a bear, seated like a teddy bear, would be the most stable form. It's the only reason he chose a bear is because it seemed like the most stable form. Well, of course, if you made it this high, it would be quite cute, but it wouldn't be much beyond cute. So we had to make it with some serious scale. And so it took us 1.5 years to find the torso. First thing we had to do was find the rocks. We went out around, we scouted, we drove around, we hired students to drive around, we advertised. We then we talked to Boy Scouts who own a lot of property. We talked to ranchers. We talked finally to the Pala Indians who said, can't take any rocks from our land, but we have an old quarry that we're not using anymore, and you can take whatever you want from there. We went, and there was the torso above ground, because you see them, but you can't get to them. You couldn't get a crane to them. There was the perfect torso just waiting for us. So Tim and Matthew chose a lot of rocks from around there. And then we stored them off campus over by the shake table. And the torso weighs 217,000 pounds. It had to come back down from Pala on an 18-axle truck, the one that moves the shuttle, in the middle of the night with a 4-car police escort. My husband and I followed it down. It was quite amazing because, the truck could only go like 35 miles an hour. And so it was quite a scene with these flashing lights and this big, huge rock. And then Tim, that arm with the 13 on it weighs 33,000 pounds. It's not like Tim could mess around with the rocks, on this site where they were stored. So we had to think of some way for him to figure it out. And so Matthew had the idea of having the rocks scanned. You can sort of see these lines of the scan that go there and there. And so we had them all scanned, And then we took the scans to the supercomputer center, and they spit out miniature exact replicas. So we could send a whole box of just miniature replicas of all these rocks to Tim, and then he could figure out exactly which ones he wanted and how he wanted them to go together. And then we had to find a construction company that would install them and make them earthquake-proof. So that was another challenge. But here they are. This is the day that we had to wait for this hall. Where are we now? Atkinson Hall to be finished. This building was just finished. And then to get their trucks and their porta potties and all the stuff out of the center courtyard there. We worked with the landscape people who were doing the plan. And then the structural Pacific Southwest Structures was the people who figured out how to make this bear earthquake proof, etc. So you can see here, this was the scary day. This was when they brought the big rock in. But you can see this is about 7 feet deep. And I don't know if you can really tell, but there's a metal plate down in there that's going to attach to this metal plate. It was attached to that rock. We had 2 300-ton cranes at the site, one to lift it up off the, horizontally. And you can still see, well, you can't see in this picture. Okay. Well, you can, right? Never mind. And then another crane to move it forward and come into the waiting, to the waiting pad for it. This was scary, this moment. The guy who does what they call I think it's the layout or something, which is step by step exactly what's going to happen, said he hadn't slept for a week because it's so heavy. But it all worked. And here's Bear. And those trees have grown up now. And Bear has become Barry Potter. One day, Bear has gotten heart eyeglasses for Valentine's Day. It's gotten an entire crew outfit. It's gotten a big bear trap out in front with a pot of honey in the middle. We love all these. It got a scarf. Some women in the community knit a great big scarf for it for Founders Day a few years ago. And this sign was out there but it was put up by the cups, the cups stand there, the coffee stand people. But somebody stole it, so it's not there anymore, sadly. Anyway, Bear has taken on its own life. Then this is when the Rice Center East was being expanded. The architects came to me and said, we have this huge wall we don't know what to do with. Do you have anything to do, any ideas? And I thought immediately of Barbara Kruger because she's fabulous with graphics and with scale. And she taught here for 5 years before she went to UCLA. And so this feels like a kind of depot or an airport or a travel, space in here. So that's where you're thinking about time. So this is a work about time. And you've got these big clocks with these rectangular sections that say another day, another shirt, another time, another night, another sweater, another love. So it's sort of how you measure time, by another car, when you got your car or whatever. So that's a clue. And then you have these two, where the red is, maybe you know this already, but they're what's happening right now, this instant. Those are Reuters and news readouts to what's happening this minute. And then in the floor, there are these echoing rectangular terrazzo things with quotations from famous artists. Well, only one famous artist, Andy Warhol, but other quotations. My favorite is one of my favorites is the H.L. Mencken that says, Puritanism, a haunting fear that someone somewhere might be happy. I don't know if you've noticed. And then my real favorite is Borges. I have always imagined that paradise will be a kind of library. Love that. Anyway, we get to Fallen Star, finally. And then I'm going to talk. Is everybody okay? Does anybody have any questions? Okay, I'm marching on. So Dohosa, Doho is an artist whose work I first saw in New York at PS1. It was a silk house. It was a skin of a house. And it was obviously an Asian house. And it was hung from the ceiling. And it was sort of drifting. And it just blew me away. I followed his work for a while. He did more house things. And he did a lot of other stuff that were amazing. And he did this traditional Korean coat. The Seattle Art Museum has it, and other people now do too, but that he made. It's a beautiful gown. I don't have pictures of all of those, but that he made out of soldiers' dog tags. So it's a gorgeous Korean gown made out of war things, you know, and he's turned it beautiful. And at the front, it's open, and inside is highly polished brass. So when you stand there, you see yourself in it. So you're reflected in it. So it's this, and the dog tags can go all the way out to the walls, you know, and if he wants them to. And he's actually going to have a big show at the museum. I should tell you this last, but in March, and you'll see he's done the apartments that he's lived in. He's done them all in silk. He's done all of the furniture in silk, including the toilets and the sinks. The meticulous weaving, I mean, sewing of these things is quite extraordinary. And he has become so successful that he could afford to, this is his favorite project. This is like his dream come true. He had two ideas for us. One was a Korean garden on the back of a truck that just sort of landed in some sort of berm as if it had been driven all the way from Korea, which is, of course, impossible, but so is a house from the East Coast or somewhere out of, God knows where, but crashing into a building. And we chose to go with the house. And he thought nobody would ever try to do this. So we became heroes. Here you can see how it's on there. We tried to put it on Urey Hall. Urey Hall scientists said, we don't want people coming and going, and our labs are open, we've got all this stuff. So we continued our search, and we're one day up talking to Frieder Seibel, who was the Dean of Engineering, and we looked out the window, and there was this big platform, and we thought, maybe we could put a house out there. And Frieder said, sure. It wasn't quite that easy, but he almost did. So, you know, what I first have to do is the Dean of Engineering's building, right? So I have to get him on board. This is people ask about how you do this. I have to get him on board. The more he thought about it, you know, he thought about it. And he thought, okay, let's just do it. And I had to get the Jacobs, Irwin and Jonas, the Jacobs School of Engineering. And I've already told this to some of you earlier, but Irwin was kind of nervous. You know, he kept saying, no, Mary, I don't know. And I finally said, Irwin, are you afraid it's going to make your building look silly? And he said, yeah, kind of. I said, it's going to make it famous. So anyway, there it is. And it has. It's gone viral. You probably all know. It's pretty amazing. But we, again, got the structural people and all this stuff, and built it. I wanted to build it on campus where people could actually watch it growing. And it took from, I think, June to November. November 15th, 2011, we had the biggest crane you can get in North America, or anywhere, I think, but one of them, come and lift. The house weighs 70,000 pounds. The crane came in early in the morning. The, what do they call them, counterweights came in not much later, and then they messed around until almost noon. And I was getting nervous. Do these guys know what they're doing? You know, they would lift it up a foot or less, and then they'd put it back down, and then they'd do it again. I thought, Doho was getting nervous. And anyway, all of a sudden, without any warning, it just, they went up, and it took less than 5 minutes. It was pretty amazing. There's a video of it that UCTV did on our website, which is quite fun. Doho said, when I was going, he said, Doho, Mary, my heart is coming out of my mouth. Anyway, he's doing this movie, as I was saying, that's a full-length feature movie about the building of this house, which is really cool. And we're going to premiere it when the museum has, in March of 2016, when the museum has this big show of his. And that show was put together by a group in Austin, Texas, Austin Contemporary they're called. And they asked me last year to come out and talk about the Stuart Collection. And I did, and one of the collectors who was at this talk came up to me afterwards and said, Mary, do you have any idea what a deal you got with that de Hossa? And I said, yeah, I kind of do, because he just bought for $1.5 million, a sculpture this high. And so that's, Doho's become a pretty big deal. And this show, you should all see it. It's really going to be fabulous. I saw it there. So there you can see that, and then you can see the inside of the house. And then you all know you can go in, and we opened it in June 7th, 2007, and there's Doho. Oh, that's the next one, talking about it to people. He's really beautiful, and on that shirt, he did things with thread. He's done a lot of unbelievable things with thread. That picture is anyway, it's complicated. I should keep going because I've already talked for an hour almost. This is John Luther Adams, the next project. John Luther is a composer. He did this thing in Lincoln Center last summer that got rave reviews, and he did this same piece in Balboa Park in the Japanese garden. And they had musicians all around in the canyon there and the water coming down, and I don't know, I thought it was just magical. And what he's doing for us, he also got a Pulitzer. The Seattle Symphony commissioned him to write a symphony, which he did. They played it at Carnegie Hall last year, 2014, and he got a Pulitzer. The La Jolla Symphony and Chorus has been doing his works. In fact, they're doing one this weekend on Saturday and Sunday, his symphonies. And he lives and breathes music. He's a serious musician. He's so excited about this piece he's doing for us that he said, Mary, this could be the most important thing I've done. So he chose, we scouted around, this theater, this eucalyptus grove out by the theater. You can see this is Mandell Wyse Theater right here. I never can figure out what this is doing. And so there's a nice old, not very big eucalyptus grove right there. And this bicycle path, see the shoe is in there. The bicycle path is going to come sort of right down along here and we'll go over by the shoe and then I guess come out over here. But yeah, over here somewhere. But that's why we think it'll be great, because people will maybe hear things as they bicycle by, and also that the shoe will get more exposure. But what he's doing, and we've worked with UCSD engineers, electrical engineers, with the Scripps oceanographers who know about depth sensors and all kinds of sensors. And what does he say here? Long-term, that's true. Then he says in this next one, there'll be no pre-recorded elements. Everything, it's influenced by the wind, the rain, the sound of the trees, the sound of cars going by, the sun. It'll be different in winter and summer and on a rainy day or a cloudy day or a sunny day or at night. And it'll never be the same. So he's calling it the wind garden now, not sound garden, but we're kind of excited about, here, maybe let's see if this works. This is just a sample. We did a sample we set it all up for him to work on in June, and he came and gave a talk to the Friends of the Stuart Collection. Oh no, that's not what I meant to do. Oh, shoot, no, wait, let's go back. Oh, I can't. I was going to play this little thing for you, but I don't know if it. Wait, I have to. Let me see if I can figure this out. I need help. I don't know how to do these things. Wait, I think I've got it though. Yeah, here we are. Okay, now let's see if I can do this. Can you hear anything?
Not yet.
Oh yeah, it sounds a little bit like bells.
Oh yeah, you hear it?
It's very subtle. It'll be subtle unless the wind is blowing really hard. I tried to turn it up here, but it didn't do anything. Okay. Anyway, I think it'll be a kind of magical place to go and listen. He's sort of setting it up. Oh, let's try it again. No, it's not working anymore. Okay, but I think the feeling that you get when you're surrounded by this work is that sort of like you're a part of something bigger and that everything matters. You know, everything feeds into this. And it's subtle, but you can sit there for a long time and just sort of, I don't know, meditate or whatever you want to do. Just listen to these sounds and wonder where they come from or how they work or whatever. But I think, you know, it'll never be the same. It'll be different every hour, every day, every minute. And we think it'll be a really nice place for people to go. So that's our next project. That's the end, unless you want to hear about more projects. Yes. I hope it's managed, the whole collection has managed to sort of change the feeling of the campus a little bit. You know, people tell me that sometimes, and I think that's, you know, one of the nicest things that could happen is that this art is just around. Kiki Smith, we've just done a film, did I say that already, that you can Google or go on UCTV and just look for the Stuart Collection, and then we've just finished it. And in it, Bruce Nauman says, I'll answer your question in a second. Bruce Nauman says, the thing about the Stuart Collection is not there to talk about the importance of art. It's just there. And I love that. And Kiki Smith says, it's really important to have something inexplicable, totally inexplicable in your life every day. And so, you know, those two are my favorite quotes. And there's a hilarious thing with Bill Wegman at the end if you listen to, you know, watch the whole thing. But yes, you have a question.
I was just going to ask when the Wind Garden is.
We're aiming for April. What? Of next year. Yeah. The only thing that would slow it down is El Nino, because we can't be installing it in the rain. It'll be fine once it's installed, but we'll have wires and stuff out there, so it can't really, we can't work when it's raining. So if it doesn't rain, we'll have it in April. If it doesn't, or if it doesn't rain at the wrong time, you know. Yeah, we'll have a, that's our hope. I'm still raising money, but we're almost there. It's $700 and some thousand.
We have time for one more. Maybe I'll take inviter's prerogative. So one thing that's amazing for me about the Stuart Collection is the fact that people hang out on so much of it. You know, if you think about like a Rodin sculpture, you don't get, you know, students lounging on it doing their algebra homework. And so the fact that, you know, like, I was thinking about that walking in this morning, that there's always kids climbing on that bear. And that makes it is like a lot, it's more woven into the university than it is like a don't touch me.
Yeah. Well, I've tried to get that kind of art. You know, I asked Richard Serra early on, because he's a friend, and we'd had a show of his in Portland. And he wanted to do some things that just, you know, I said, we can't do it. I kept saying, think Pistoia, which is this Italian collection where he's got a beautiful outdoor piece that plays with the hillside. And, you know, I think this campus is not city enough, and it's not urban, and it's not country. And so we just didn't, you know, it never worked. He wanted, you know, most of all, he wanted this Salk Center. He knew that was not possible, but, you know, he has no small ego. And then he wanted an easement on Genesee. And said, you know, it's just not going to happen. You know, it's just, we're never going to get an easement on Genesee, so forget it. Anyway, so we've had a lot, you know, we've had a lot more proposals than we've done. And they fall apart for various reasons. I mean, Martin Purrier wanted to do a suspension bridge over the canyon, but the canyons, to stabilize it and make it possible, you would have had to put so much concrete that it became a millions of dollars project with, you know, really engineers. And he said, that's, you know, let's just not do it. And, you know, well, I can't do $1 million, I mean, more than, you know, million multiple works. And I keep saying we're not going to do any more that are so expensive. And then they just get more expensive. So we just keep going anyway. So thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoy the Stuart Collection and tell everybody you know. And thank you.